So where are we at today, apart from either side of a bit of a windy and noisy main road? We're in Baxenden, just on the border of Rossendale and Accrington. And if you look behind me, that tree and that heap, well, that is part of the Baxenden Collieries. And yet Baxenden's biggest export, arguably, are Hollands pies. You wouldn't equate Baxenden with coal. But if you went back, certainly to the late 1800s, the mid 1800s, it was really important. And George Hargreaves and Company run the Baxenden Collieries for many years. But Hole in the Bank, that's the pit behind me, which is Hole in the Bank. That made it into the first decade of the 20th century. And the Baxenden and Accrington collieries were really, really important. They were far more productive and more valuable to George Hargreaves and Company and the previous company, Ashworth Hargreaves, than were the Rossendale pits. But now, there's hardly anything left of it. But when I used to come up in the 1980s and 1990s, when I used to live on the caravan park there at Acre Mill, you could actually see the top of the shaft. And believe it or not, if we could go back, get Tom Baker and his TARDIS, and we could go back to the late 1860s, on one particular day, this road was packed with people who were dying to see the equivalent of the gunfight at the OK Corral, or in other words, a fight between two elderly gentlemen in the 70s, which were John Hall, who was the outgoing manager and partner of Ashworth Hargreaves here at Baxenden Collieries, and George Hargreaves, obviously, another partner, who they wanted John Hall out and gone. It's a long story that we're not going to discuss today, but anyway, lots of people turned out and lined the streets that morning to watch George Hargreaves come across and turf John Hall out of the offices. It never happened, it was done a different way. John Hargreaves was another partner in the firm who owned the print works down in Accrington, Broad Oak Print Works. Now then, so what we're going to do today? Today is a bit impromptu. I'm going to go for a walk, and we're going to go up to Stonefold and then up Goodshaw Lane and look for some old pits that were on Yates's map, right at the top of Goodshaw Lane there, near Scarbarn, and they're on the map of 1786. Make our way across to where the Hambleden Hall colliery was, or Hambleden Hill. And I'm going to try and find that, which was associated with the pickups and the old Cupola colliery. And then, if we've got time, we're going to make our way back round via Moleside, and maybe even, if we do have time, get back to part of the Baxenden Collieries and where they were working underground there at Mitchell House Reservoirs. So that's the plan. Let's see if it unfolds. You wouldn't think it'd been such an important hive of activity here, would you, Hole in the Bank? And it was sunk in the mid-1840s, 1845, 1847. It doesn't quite make it on the first OS map, but it was sunk very close to then. And they'd steadily been working their way up from Accrington for donkey's years. Baxenden Collieries go back a long, long way. And they're all joined underground to Hargreaves' pits eventually that got worked down in Ackie. And the Hole in the Bank itself is only about 90 foot deep. It's not exactly that deep, but it works all the way up towards Mitchell House and then right over the moors towards, it doesn't go as far as Broad Oak that way, or the Broad Oak Reservoir on the top, but it goes an awful long way. But across down in the valley there, that's where the railway came up, and that's where also one of the main pit heads were for the railway pit, sunk next to the railway, believe it or not. And there was a lot of coke ovens there, I can't tell you how many. Like we said, there wasn't just pies sort of exported from here, a lot of coke went from here, an awful lot of coke. This is a really important industry, the Accrington Collieries. So down there is where the railway pit was, but that was kind of working more towards Green Howarth than that, where the Victoria pit was. And the Victoria was about the most productive colliery that George Hargreaves at that time sort of had. So there's bags and bags of mining history here, and we really need to do a proper video and story on it, because especially that incident I've just talked to you about the near fight. And the manager that came here It came on the wave of that. When what that dispute was about, Ashworth Hargreaves had the lease off the Duke of Buccleuch since about 1845, 1846, and then it was a 21-year lease and it was up for renewal. But George Hargreaves and one or two of the other partners didn't want John Hall in the new partnership when they signed the new lease in the 1860s, because he was letting the pitch, it's a long story, but he was letting the pitch go. He wasn't keeping proper accounts. He'd lost his son, who was a manager here, so that obviously had a great effect on him. So it was like a takeover. They were trying to ease him out. Well, they weren't doing no easing. It was pretty aggressive. So that's what that dispute was about. But when the new lease was signed and the new company was formed, George Hargreaves and Co, as opposed to Ashworth Hargreaves and Co, the first manager was Richard Hudson here. And Richard Hudson, you've probably heard me bang on about him. He was part of he was an in-law of Peter Pickup. Peter Pickup married his sister. So Richard Hudson had been up where we're going to walk later on, right up on Hambleden Hill. He'd been manager at Cupola. Then he'd gone across to be manager at the newly opened Townley, or Boggart Brig, because Townley hadn't been sunk. And for some reason he then came here. And he caused a strike. It's a fantastic story, but for another day. Anyway, this is where the hole in the bank was. All the main buildings were on the main road here, the colliery offices and things like that. And down there was just an absolute hive of industry. Anyway, let's get up to Stonefold and start going over the tops. Brig just above the park, and if I remember rightly, Father said that this was a tunnel tip, what we're stood on now, just above the park. It was the Hawswater Aquaduct, and if I'm wrong, somebody can maybe put us right, but you look at it, it certainly is tip. Where the shaft exactly was, I'm not sure. Now then, the Hawswater Aquaduct, for those that don't know, ran from Hawswater in the lakes right down to Manchester, to Heaton Park. Actually, that big lake in Heaton Park, that was where the outlet was. But it came through Rossendale, and it came through, I'm sure, in the 1950s. Now, Father was born in 27. He started work and went to work for Bracewell and Priors in Bacup as an electrical apprentice. And believe it or not, that was the first time he'd ever been to Bacup when he started work. Boy, did they travel. But when he'd done his time, because Bracewell and Priors were like contractors, they'd go around different jobs. When he'd done his time, the tunnel came through Rossendale. He then went working on the tunnel, but it was big money. It's a massive engineering project, and it was an adventure for a young bloke, I suppose. So he went sparking on the tunnel, and he worked at Brimbella, Townsend Fold, and he also came up here to Rising Brig. And the shaft here at Rising Brig, if I remember, was about 300 feet deep, he reckoned. And the tailor, he told me, one day he was going down and they just had a sinking kibble, they didn't have cages. And he was going down in the kibble with somebody else. And the little winder that they had, the rope actually slipped off. It slipped off, a lap slipped off, and the bucket went boom, like that. And Father thought he was plummeting to the bottom. It didn't half give him a fright. But anyway, this was where the tunnel came through, and it broke into coal workings when it got over towards Aki at Cat Hall. They actually broke into the old Cat Hall workings. But the Hawswater Aqueduct is really interesting in itself, and I've got some photographs. I wish I got some more tales off Father before it was too late. Anyway, here we are, tunnel tip. How many walk past it, play on the park, and don't really realise what it is? Right, we've come up through the village of Stonefold. Yeah, more costume changes than Dynasty, isn't there? And where we are now is at the junction of Goodshaw Lane. Yes, there's two Goodshaw lanes. There's one over the Crawshaboothe Loughclough, and there's one here as well. And we've got the King's Highway that we've already been walking up. And when I come along the King's Highway, all I want to do is sing that Tom Petty song off Out the Grey Wide Open, going down the King's Highway. Fantastic song on a summer's day. But anyway, we're going to have a look up Goodshaw Lane for a start and look for these old pits up there. And Goodshaw Lane top is interesting again in a mining sense, because the pickups had a farm up there. I think it was Peter Pickup's father, again called Peter, they originated up there. But also Joshua Turner came from up Goodshaw Lane top, round about the Withens area. Joshua ended up as the under manager at Swinshire, and they migrated from there. Now when we look at Goodshaw Hill Colliery on the plans, we see these old workings. There's old coal pits on the 1844 map as well. But they could have just been for tenants. But these old workings at Goodshaw Hill look like they have been a proper colliery work. So we're going to have a look for those shafts, one of which appears on Yates's map of 1786. So we'll have a wander up Goodshaw Lane, eh? So I'll just explain where we are and what the geology is. But start, like I said, we're on Goodshaw Lane, the old Goodshaw Lane. And this was a very important highway back in the day. I mean, now it's just a bit of a track. Cyclists use it a lot, services the farms. But this was the main road over from Stonefold, Rising Bridge, from the King's Highway, right across to Goodshaw Fold, then across on over to Gambleside and on towards Burnley. So back in the day, this was a very important lane. And we're on the lower coal measures, as per usual. East Lancashire is on the lower coal measures. But we're going to be looking at some of the middle coal measures today as well. If we look behind in the other direction, I can maybe explain it a little bit better. So, we can just see Goodshaw Hill, which is the knoll coming up. And if you look at it from the other side, it's like a continuation of Cribden. It comes up in at least 3 distinctive step faults. But up there is where Goodshaw Hill Colliery was, entered from the Lough Clough side. But it worked right across here, right across the hillside, and down onto this side where the coal crops out again. But as we get over towards the north and more towards Huncoat and Burnley, there's a big fault that separates the Goodshaw Hill Colliery from the Baxenden Collieries. Goodshaw Hill was a drift mine right up there. There were some old shafts, but basically it was a drift mine. Whereas Baxenden, where we've been down to a hole in the bank, you've seen it was a shaft, and it's a lot lower down. So there's a big fault runs across the top here that cuts off the different coal measures between the Baxenden coals and the Lough Clough coals. So we're going to have a look up on the top there, see if we can find those old shafts. Now, if we sort of go towards the Rossendale side, on this side, I know Rossendale, going over more towards Crosher Booth way, you will be on the other side of the hill anyway. The lower mountain mine finishes and you get into the sandrock coals, which haven't been worked, or to a very small extent in Cribden Clough. And then we've got the flag rock on that side, so not really much coal being worked at all on that side. There's vast reserves though. Anyway, let's continue up Goodshaw Lane and see what we can see up here. And there the red waters flow, oozing out that bank side a little bit, but coming down the lane as well. You know where that is, don't you? That's the ironstone, the iron water, the car water, associated with the coal workings. Right, we're up on the top of Goodshaw Lane, and the farm behind us is Goodshaw Lane top on the old 1844 map. And I've just knocked on and got talking to 2 really nice people, Luke and his father. So that was great talking to them. And according to them, according to his dad, that used to be, it's down on the deeds as the brew house as well. And Luke seemed to think it had also been a pub, but he gave it a different name, the Stop and Rest. So that's something to look into. But just off the top of my head, I think that could be where one of the Pickup family was. When Peter Pickup Senior, who got killed in the stone quarry, I'm not sure, but I think that's possibly where he was born. I'll have to check the census. Now, I mentioned Joshua Turner from coming up here. It's not Joshua Turner, it's Joshua Howarth, who became the under manager up at Swinshire. And they were up here, New Withens, were also Dunwickshire Close. So again, I'm wondering if they're all mixed up with the mining, these old pits up here, because we're definitely on top of coal here. So I'm going to have a wander up the rest of Goodshaw Lane there towards Scarbarn and see if we can find this one on that was on Yates's map. Well, we're on the lane coming across from top of Goodshaw Lane top to Scar Barn. I've met some cracking people this morning who really helped out with stuff. Now then, we're looking for this shaft off Yates's map, and I'm wondering if this is the area. There's an old quarry behind me, and this looks like quarry tips as well, but there'll be coal. There's coal in this heap, and it looks like the possibly could have been a shaft here. Bearing in mind we're going back now to 1786. Now that, you know, 200 or 300 years there, aren't we? Pardon my maths or lack of it. And I'll show you, have a look. Can we see where these reeds are here? Now, I can't say it definitely is, but if I was going to put a stab on it, and maybe venture somebody else's reputation on it, it's a good candidate, the best candidate I've found so far today. If you have a look round now, you're looking across on the Rossendale side, down onto Goodshaw Fold, way up, where are we? Down onto Goodshaw Fold, see Goodshaw Fold Road going up, and I can't really point it out. Maybe I could when I get home and do a still, and we can point out where the rest of this road goes up through Goodshaw Fold, up through Badger Court Estate, and right over the back of Badger Court Estate to Compston's Cross, and then finally it would have been down into Burnley. But if we carried on this way, we're going to Scar Barn, but we need to get on actually. Now then, what is interesting about this road, look at Goodshaw Fold Village down there, and remember a few videos ago, last year, we did one on the Rehoboth Chapel, which is down there, and next to it lived Richard Hudson for a while, who was a manager up here. Well, when I say up here, he was the manager at Colliery. So I'm wondering if he came up this way to work, and how many men did come up this way to work. Anyway, I'll have a bit more investigation of this site. I mean, there's definitely quarries behind me, but that does look like it's been something else. You've got the reeds, you've got this sort of protective thing around the back. There's coal all on this bank, it's not crop edge. And a lot of the bank looks like pit muck as well, you know, from shaft sinking. So maybe this is, I hope it is. But anyway, have a good look at the East Lancashire landscape. Down to Crawshaboos and up to Loughclough, where I was brought up there on the estate. I spent most of my life looking across here. Well, there used to be a couple of old air shafts up here. You could see them in the 70s. You could see the stone lining on them, joined by a track, and this could be the track. So this could be where one of them was. Now, when I say they were air shafts, they could have been pits in their own right years and years and years and years ago. And by the way, I'm not just wandering across the moors. I've got the farmer's permission. And this is the remains of the other one with a dead sheep. So we're right now in the heart of Goodshaw Hill Colliery. If we were underground, we're in the main body of it. There's the dead sheep. That's where the other shaft was. Like I say, in the 70s, you could see the stone lining on them. And Goodshaw Hill worked right under here with panel on, right sort of on the backbone of the hill. I mean, at one time, obviously this was a main road, but it's more of a drover's road. When we're talking to the person who lives in what was Lane Head Top, he was relating about when they used to drive cattle all the way from Burnley. He did give me the name of the people that did it, and they'd take them to sell them at auction at the Swan Public House in Hambleden. They'd bring all the cattle across here. So this was more or less a drover's road. The main highway was further down, and it was actually known as the King's Highway. There's cobbles on it and everything. I meant to come back across there, we'll see if we can. Well, it's called the King's Highway because, well, back in the days, as you know, Rossendale was a forest. You can still see it marked on a map as a forest. Not only Rossendale, perhaps because this is Accrington, the old Accrington 100, old Accrington, new Accrington. At Hapton Park, that was all park land, which meant hunting ground. So the King's Highway was used when they were coming along and doing their hunting for all the noblemen and what have you. So it's a very, very old road. And some of the places, I think High Riley dates back to the 1200s. So a lot of ancient stuff up here, but again, it was forest. So it came under forest laws. And it wasn't really till the 1500s that it started to get deforested and populated more. Then we've got another air shaft. And Mitchell House Reservoirs in the background. And Baxenden Hall in the bank came under Mitchell House. And there was another shaft to one side, Black Moss Pit. And there was an incident there. I think a young lad fell down the shaft while he was out playing. There's a couple of shafts actually under the reservoir as well. And they're for drainage. So Baxenden Colliery went right under there from the hole in the bank, and all the coal came out near hole in the bank. Then they put a new drift in near Shoe Mill at one time. And there's somebody swirling at the bottom. Smoke gets in your eyes. And I remember in the 1970s, 79-ish, some really naughty boys coming across from the Goodshaw sort of side, and there was a big fire up on Hambleden. Yeah, very naughty lads. Well, I made out going to that. Coming across that field up there, flipping heck. I thought, I think I'm going to live in this field for the rest of my life because I can't be bothered to walk anymore.
You don't know. Oh, nice day though, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Is that the decoy site down there?
No, that's the old res. Snow used to be as high as walls and we used to jump off it. We used to go, I know you shouldn't have done, but we used to go ice skating on it.
Aye. So this behind us was the reservoir for Broadoak Printworks. And Moleside Colliery came right under there, it left a load of pillars to support it. And at the back of it somewhere is the old Hambleden Hall farm. Sounds grand, doesn't it, Hambleden Hall, but apparently it was just a farm. And then we've got the Hambleden Hall Colliery, or Hambleden Hill Colliery, which was Peter Pickups at the back of it. And then we'll try and have a wander across the Moleside. So that's the remains of the res, drained, and that all that water went down to Broadoak Printworks, like I said, owned by John Hargreaves. And John Hargreaves became a partner with George Hargreaves in Hargreaves Collieries. Anyway, there's also up here, there's a World War II decoy site. There's quite a few. There's one on the other side of Hambleden, near the old cupola, up near the radio mast, but there's one here with some buildings. I'll see if I can find it. Stone mines too, although looks a bit precarious that, doesn't it? Embankment for the reservoir, but you know, for Broadoak Mill. And there we're at Hambleden Hall farm. It sounds grand, doesn't it, Hambleden Hall, but it was just a farm as far as I believe. Yeah, we're going to have some bait here, and then I'll look for the remains of Pickups Colliery as well, just further up. I didn't have to walk so far. This is a Hambleden Hall Colliery. Hambleden Hall's just there. The res is there. And Dickinson does give a date for the sinking of this. Could be around about the 1870s, but it was part of the Cupola Colliery. This is like Pickups royalty. Moleside, which I haven't got time to get down to today, was working under the res. And down towards Moleside End there, and we found some really good photographs the other day in the London Illustrated News of them outcropping. So Hambleden Hall it's about 70 yards down to the Arley, and that's 210 feet. And it's a very complicated geology in Cupola, it really is, and I need to get to the Records Office and look at Peter's notes. Now, Yates in 1786 puts a track going up the moor, and it shows an old shaft up there, and then Hennett shows Cupola Colliery just up here as well. but I think it's a case of going home and getting on the LiDAR rather than just wandering aimlessly on the moor and really pinpointing where it's at. So anyway, this is Hambleden Hall Colliery. It would have closed in about 1888, 1889 when Cupola totally finished. Jack Naden did give me a newspaper cutting on it. I think Brooks and Pickup were having a bit of an industrial dispute with some of the men over wages. It mentions the Hambleden Hill Colliery. Well, this is it, Hambleden Hall. And it sort of intimated that quite a lot of the older guys were kind of coiling down here. How they got the coal away from here, I don't know whether it went this way or it went back underground and out towards Zunnickshire. These are things we don't know yet. But anyway, this is where the pit was. And there's the res. So I'm going to make my way back down the King's Highway now towards Stonefall. Oh, that field up on Hambleden more or less finished me off. My legs are killing us like a moonwalk. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. I know we haven't come to any conclusion, we just seem to have wandered around the hills a little bit. And I didn't take you to the decoy site, but I'll show you about, well, I will have already shown you about it by the time you get to this sort of stage. So what I need to do is get back to the Lancashire Records office at Preston. I really need to do that. And the way the world's going at present, I want to find out what Peter Pickup did up here and where Old Sink was in 1820 before we get totally vaporising some sort of nuclear flipping whatever, these lunatics that are lunatic politicians and globalists. Anyway, never mind about that. So I'm going to, like I say, go to Preston Records office, find out more about where the cupola was on this side of the hill and the Hambleden Hall, and then maybe I didn't get time to go down to Moleside, so I need to dedicate more time because I've got quite a good story about Moleside as well. And yesterday while I was looking for stuff, I turned up quite a lot about the under manager. He's a really interesting character, so that's something to look forward to and to complete the story there in Baxenden. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hey, catch you next time, I hope.